Well, it's too bad that light is reflecting terribly. Let me try moving this. There's a familiar logo. The Apple logo. Well, as you probably know from one of my older videos, I did in fact have a MacBook. Not a MacBook Pro, but just a simple MacBook from 2008. And the reason I purchased that is so that I would be able to edit the video that was recorded with my Sony Digital 8 camcorders, such as that Sony DCR TRV-280. And I actually ended up selling that MacBook because I thought that I would be able to use a video editor I thought had decent deinterlacing. Because these camcorders record DV video. It's interlaced, 60 interlaced fields per second for a total of 30 frames per second. And it turns out that video editors, even though it's 2015, really fail miserably when it comes to editing video in standard definition and deinterlacing it. So I ended up looking around and I came across this MacBook that was being sold. Amazingly, this one actually is more well equipped than the original MacBook I bought, because I actually knew what I was looking for this time. I shopped around for a while and I came across this one. It's a 2008 MacBook. This actually came with a genuine Apple charger. The Apple logo, 60-watt MagSafe power adapter. This is a genuine charger, whereas the one that I got with my other MacBook, because my MacBook didn't come with a power adapter, was a non-genuine, no-name brand, and it really didn't work all that well. It was absolute rubbish. When you'd connect it up to power, you'd hear a very loud pop and actually see a little bit of a spark. It got extremely hot, which this one, the genuine one, does not. The ones that you can buy on eBay now don't use this style. It's more of a right angle connector that goes onto the side of the computer, whereas this one, as it tries to fall away from me, you can see is slightly different, but it doesn't really matter. And unlike the non-genuine ones, this actually has a decent amount of force that holds it to the computer. The non-genuine ones, they're so cheap that they don't want to put enough magnetic material in it, that if you so much as just tap it, it snaps off and then the computer's without power. So this one thankfully has an actual genuine Apple power adapter. And in addition to that, this has a genuine Apple MacBook rechargeable battery, which my other MacBook that I had for a while did not have a genuine battery. So I had to buy a generic replacement. And of course, they're a dime a dozen all over eBay, Amazon, and battery stores alike, for varying prices ranging from $15 all the way up to $30. And you really never know what you're getting with those. And case in point was that non-genuine knockoff battery that I got claimed to have about 2 hours of battery life, but meanwhile, once the MacBook got around 35% battery, it would just lock up and act as though you've disconnected all the power from it. And it turns out that if you looked at it, you could actually, because they use such cheap plastic, you could look and hold the battery up to the light, and you can see the battery cells only took up about a third of the battery, whereas this one you can feel, even though you can't see through it, the entire battery is taken up by the cells. So it's pretty much the same computer that I reviewed already, so I won't really go into it too much. You have your multi-drive, which is slot loading. All your regular ports here, FireWire, thankfully. I believe these were some of the last MacBooks produced that actually had 6-pin FireWire ports on them. And yes, that does act, this microphone in also doubles as a line input. And this one is in much better condition. It doesn't have any chipped, broken corners. The lid up here is not cracked at all. It just has some wear, but that's to be expected with a computer from 2008. There's no chipping, there's no cracking on any of the corners. The only thing that would indicate that this computer had received any sort of use by its previous owner is this chip right here. Aside from that, the computer is in almost impeccable condition. Both of these rubber stops here are in place. There's no cracking anywhere. I don't have to deal with this LCD also doesn't have any bad spots on it. And this one came with a whole treasure trove of pre-installed applications, of course some of which are free, but it helps that they're installed already, so the computer is good to go out of the box. It didn't come with Google Chrome. I installed that because I really dislike using Safari, and some sort of old version of iTunes that I do need to update. Audacity, iLife 11, which is terrible when it comes to editing interlaced video, and iMovie 06, which I had to install. That it didn't come with that. Final Cut Pro, I think this is Final Cut Pro 10, and my mouse just disappeared for a moment. ScreenFlow, some sort of version of ScreenFlow, and then Microsoft Office, what I believe to be 2007, and it actually had some previous files from the other owner, some sort of MP4 video file that I saw in here of some sort of a car show, another video file that won't open, and then ClipWrap, which is also a program that you normally need to pay for, but this came with it for free, which allows you to edit these MTS files that HD camcorders such as this Canon create in even iMovie 06. My reliable daily driver computer, which I've used since I had it new back in 2000, I believe it to be 2008, although it could have very well been late 2007 I acquired this computer. It's decided finally to kick the bucket, so to speak. Well, not the computer, but the hard drive inside it. It's a Seagate something or other, and after many years of reliable service, it's finally decided to quit working. Rather unceremoniously, it just decided one day to stop working after hearing some ominous clicking sounds coming from it. And the writing was on the wall, so to speak, for several months now, after receiving a recommendation from a fellow YouTuber to run CrystalDisk Info to get some information as to the hard drive's health and current state of affairs. It was made readily apparent to me that it was experiencing several bad sectors as well as reallocated sectors. The amount of reallocated sectors was jumping exponentially with each passing day. And so it was only a matter of time until the hard drive decided to give it up altogether, and that's exactly what it did earlier today. What is it? The September the 24th of 2015. The night prior to that, I just put the computer in hibernate as I always do, so it's ready to go as soon as I press that power button, and noticed immediately that the computer was acting extremely sluggish. It took probably the better part of 5 minutes just to get past the loading Windows screen, the animated Windows logo that you see in Windows 7 when booting up, and then took another minute or two for it to show the logon window. After entering in my password, it took another good 5 or 6 minutes just to get to my desktop, and before that it would just show as a solid blue screen, and then left-clicking, certain functionality of the Windows operating system quit working altogether, and I attribute that solely to the old, slow, tired, and malfunctioning hard drive. But I was able to get it to work at least for a little while so I can back up what important data I did need to salvage, which I didn't already have backed up to my external hard drive, but you'll see what's wrong with it now. Missing the operating system. So obviously the hard drive is too far gone to be able to boot up into Windows now. I'll have to use some sort of a utility to access that hard drive, perhaps Ultimate Boot CD or Hiron's Boot CD, which I've used with a decent amount of success in the past to recover files from a misbehaving hard drive. The majority of the important stuff has already been backed up to that Toshiba 1 terabyte drive, so it's not a major loss. There's some downloaded files I would have liked to have kept so as not to have to hunt them down yet again, but as it stands right now, I'm unable to boot into Windows on this machine. Now this is not really an update. I'm sure plenty of people have seen this CRL TVS 3001 make a guest cameo on any of my live music shows in the past, about a month and a half ago, and I've had this thing for quite a while now, and it actually works very, very well. You see, this thing was sold as is, with no warranty expressed or implied on eBay, and so I really took took a chance on this, hoping that it would work. It was untested. And I received it, and when I connected up audio inputs and outputs, wired everything up, connected up to power, I saw that it was passing a signal and the view meters lit up. But upon listening to the output audio from this TVS 3001, the right channel, if I remember it correctly, or perhaps even the left channel, was incredibly distorted. And not even like somebody was turning up the volume too loud. It was just, I don't know what was wrong with it. It sounded almost like when you're trying to listen to, using an old stereo receiver and the volume controls are really scratchy. And I didn't know what was causing the problem. So I adjusted the input and the output levels, and that didn't fix anything. And then I decided to just start playing with all these toggle switches here, even though I had them in their correct positions. And it turns out that this switch right here, what I believe to be the FH filter switch, which is used for filtering out the flyback whine of a CRT display, was misbehaving. And it was on the off position, as it is now, referred to as out, but it was distorting the audio. So I started moving it up and down, and I noticed that the distortion went away if I played with it just enough. So after playing with it for quite a while, I actually ended up getting the distortion to go away. Another new audio component is this TAC PD D2681 compact disc multiplayer, and I bought it to use with my Onkyo TX440. So I would have an actual CD player so I could play music from my vast collection of compact discs. And it turns out that after several years of storage, this thing has developed a bit of a personality, if you will, or perhaps a personality disorder, to those less charitable in the viewing audience. Powering it up usually works just fine, but its problems begin to develop. I don't know if it's going to exhibit those issues. No, it's not. Many times, more often than not, it seems like, when I go to power this up, it does not open up. It just says error, and it'll try to cycle through all the discs, and it can't find anything, and it just says disk error. And if you try to eject it using this switch, nothing happens. And I guess the belt which actuates the disk tray opening and closing is beginning to fail. Perhaps it's got a soft spot in it, because if I give this thing a little whack or two on the side, it usually starts to behave again. This is a Sony CDP470 single disc changer, which I recently also acquired about a month and a half ago, if I recall correctly, for use on my live streaming music shows, because attempting to queue up music and keep track of which songs you're playing and all that sort of thing with a disc changer starts to get very confusing, especially if it doesn't offer any kind of a countdown timer which shows you the remaining time of the track which you're playing, and also doesn't have any sort of program mode, which this one also does. So I ended up buying this one for a very, very good price, and it was untested. Unfortunately, though, wasn't quite packaged as I would have liked. I have yet to actually bend and fix this metal case here. Somebody tried shoving this in a box diagonally, and in addition to chipping the plastic over here, it also ended up bending and warping this metal cover, which I need to look into fixing that. And also, and I don't know if this could be attributed to the poor packaging or perhaps just its old age, this is an early model from 1989, if the date code is to be relied upon. Ejecting discs works just fine. You can see it ejects the disc like you normally would expect. Attempting to reinsert it, though, you can see it gets stuck. And there's a gear right here. You can just barely make it out there. It's got a notched groove that sticks up. And for whatever reason, this disc tray catches on that. So the only solution I've been able to figure out right now is to simply just use your finger to slightly push it up. The display is in great condition, albeit with some scuffing and smudges. Apparently has support for a wireless control. Also, I've ended up buying a used Canon FS200. It was a deal I don't think anyone could have passed up for a camcorder. Even though it's standard definition, it still takes relatively decent video, And I got this for, I think it was $10, shipping included, because nobody wanted it, because it has a little problem. You see, it turns on just fine, and there's no SD card, so it's complaining of that. But listen to the zoom motor. That is not supposed to sound that way, and I don't know, perhaps this was received excessive wear. I think somebody just knocked it around too much, or maybe the lubrication for the lens sled has dried out over time. Obviously that's a fair bit noisier than the one that's on this camera. But because of that, I got this, like I said, for about $10, postage included, and it works just fine aside from that one problem, which isn't a huge deal because for my videos I'm really not zooming in all the time. I just keep it on the widest setting. And kind of nice that you can, even though this is a standard definition camcorder, it has a microphone jack and a headphone jack, but it also has a view meter here, which is a feature I think every camcorder should include, even if you want to turn it off. It's really nice to be able to turn it on and see the levels and whether or not you're clipping. So that works just fine. And that leads me to my next little discussion. I don't know why in this day and age, 2015, video editors are so terribly at a disadvantage when it comes to editing standard definition video, whether it be from a modern day flash memory camcorder such as this Canon FS200, or from a tape-based camcorder such as a Sony DCR TRV-280. It doesn't matter. Every video editor I've tried fails miserably in one way or another. But suffice it to say that Premiere Elements, Sony Vegas, Cyberlink Power Director, Pinnacle Studio, and Corel Video Studio all fail in one regard or another. Premiere Elements doesn't properly resize the DV widescreen or even regular DV video to square pixel. So if you try exporting to 640 by 480 or 854 by 480, that doesn't work because it puts black lines. Corel Video Studio works decently well, but deinterlacing is not exactly high quality. Pinnacle Studio has no semblance or understanding of the phrase deinterlacing and what it's supposed to do. Sony Vegas does have decent deinterlacing options, but they're all pretty poor quality, and they end up losing a fair bit of quality that your standard definition camcorder records. So no matter which one I've tried, I keep coming back to iMovie 06 because it offers probably the best amount of deinterlacing you can get without needing to venture into the lands of complicated deinterlacing scripts and all that sort of thing, and all the complications that follow with that sort of a setup. So coming back to this MacBook here, because I hope this video doesn't drag on too long. I'm not a fan of videos of epic proportions. Usually 20 to 25 minutes is the maximum amount of time I try to keep my videos under. You can see that this one is a 2.1 gigahertz Intel Core 2 Duo MacBook. The previous one that I had was 2.2 gigahertz, but this one has 4 gigabytes of DDR2 SD RAM, whereas my old one only had 2 gigabytes. This does have a 120 gigabyte hard drive, which right now, if I'm not mistaken, only has about 61 gigabytes free. Because not only does this come with Final Cut Pro, but if I recall correctly, it also comes with compressor, which leads me to my next digression. First off, I have pretty much a hatred of the new way of editing videos that Apple wants you to embark upon, at least with versions of iMovie proceeding and following iMovie 06, which is to say that this strange way that they want you to import your video and then select the portions you want and drag them up to this pseudo timeline, which is a joke in my opinion. I don't know who thought that this was going to be productive, but if you so much as move your mouse when you're trying to do, you know, frame by frame editing, it jumps frames because it locks onto the position of your mouse, which is a terrible idea. even though this MacBook came with a copy of Final Cut Pro 10, I probably won't ever use it because it's a lot more complicated than iMovie HD, probably overqualified, especially for my needs. And in addition to that, something that I find really stupid and pointless is that by default, the options that they give you to export your video are severely limited, in stark contrast to what iMovie allows you to do. iMovie, you can dial in all your settings manually, the codec, the aspect ratio, the resolution. You can't do that here. You just have these predetermined destinations, and for example, if I want to export the file, it'll pop up a screen. This is all dusty for some reason. You see, it gives you the ability to export your video, but if you go to settings, it defaults to 720 by 480, which is not a square pixel aspect ratio, so that'll cause some problems. And it doesn't really give you a finite control over your final output. So what you have to do is purchase Apple's compressor program and use that, which is 10 times more complicated than just exporting videos using iMovie 06 or even a current version of iMovie. Thankfully, this did come with compressor, which, as I understand, is a program you need to pay for. But I have no clue how to use this program and export a usable video file from this thing with the same amount of quality as I would be able to with just iMovie 06. So I don't know why they need to make it so complicated when you can just be able to... they should have, in addition to allowing you to export the compressor, because I'm sure plenty of people will argue that it gives you more control, they should have at least allowed you to export your videos while having some degree of control, similar to what you get with iMovie HD or newer versions of iMovie. I think this video has gone on long enough, and that will do it.